The books we encounter in our early childhood can have profound effects on our personality, interests, values, and outlook. They certainly did for me. One of my most vivid memories as a little kid is the sense of awe I felt at the big golden book of dinosaurs I received for my 4th birthday. I taught myself to draw by recreating the illustrations in the book. I also remember sitting in an Iowa basement a few months later, wrapped in a thin World War II Army mattress, completely absorbed in reading my first Hardy Boys mystery by flashlight while a tornado roared overhead outside. And then there was my first visit to the public library and the thrill of exploring its shelves containing more books than I'd ever imagined. I still feel echoes of that sense of wonder every time I enter a library. In this video, I'll share some of the classic children's books that defined, challenged, inspired, and grounded me during my first 7 years as a reader, from the age of 3 until I was 9. A few are still in print, but far too many aren't, rendering them relatively unknown today as many libraries have culled them from their collections. I hope publishers take notice and bring them back, even if only in digital formats. Rather than presenting the books in chronological order, I've organized them by the lessons and perspectives they taught me. Many of the books you'll see are the actual copies I read as a kid. Fantastical stories featuring anthropomorphic snowplows, koalas, and mice from renowned authors Virginia Lee Burton, William Penn Du Bois, Jean Van Leeuwen, Beverly Cleary, and Robert O'Brien were frequent rereads for me. And yes, I had a soft spot for stories about intrepid, intelligent mice. My childhood predated Brian Jacques' Redwall books, but I would have adored them back then. All of the books I just mentioned are imaginative, escapist fun with valuable lessons about responsibility, perseverance, ethical decision-making, and heroic courage and sacrifice. And absurdism in stories seasoned my taste for wry humor, in a heavily abridged edition of Mark Twain's A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, and in Norton Juster's The Phantom Toll Booth, one of the greatest books ever written, and not just for children. From an early age, I was captivated by mystery stories, beginning with an armful of Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew books scavenged from my parents' childhood reads. They led me to quick solve-it-yourself mysteries from Encyclopedia Brown author Donald J. Sobel and Alfred Hitchcock, and eventually to my favorite mystery series, The Three Investigators, also published under Hitchcock's name, but ghostwritten by respected crime author Robert Arthur during its early years. The first book in the series, The Secret of Terror Castle, also prompted my lifelong interest in classic films from the early days of Hollywood. Those books and many others like them offered role models of self-confidence and level-headed analytical problem-solving that I sought to imitate. I specifically wanted to be a combination of teenage investigators Bob Andrews and Jupiter Jones. Stories about young inventors, explorers, and entrepreneurs fascinated me. I loved their clever, sometimes Rube Goldberg-like minds, and their fierce independent streaks. I have a strong innate aversion to status quo thinking, and I can trace it back to these books and others like them. They include my all-time favorite picture book, Andrew Henry's Meadow by Doris Byrne, that I still thumb through occasionally for inspiration. The title character is a young boy who's a compulsive inventor and builder with a habit of repurposing household rooms and belongings for his projects in ways that frustrate his family. When his parents forbid his inventions, he doesn't let their opposition dampen his creative spark. Instead, he secretly packs up his tools and runs away to a meadow deep in a nearby wood, where he builds himself a cozy workshop. Before long, other misunderstood runaways from the town begin wandering into his meadow, and he proceeds to build custom houses for each of them that are, in my opinion, some of the greatest hobby huts and hideaways ever imagined for children. I also adored several middle-grade chapter book series about young inventors and entrepreneurs. The Alvin Fernald series by Clifford B. Hicks has its inventive young mischief maker tackle crime, politics, commerce, and community activism, among other topics, while Keith Robertson's endearingly compulsive entrepreneurial planner, Henry Reed, launches a series of ventures that provide plenty of life lessons, if not much commercial success. My favorites, though, were the merry pranksters of Bertrand Brinley's The Mad Scientist Club. Brinley based the club's outlandish schemes and shenanigans on real science and engineering principles, giving enterprising readers room to imagine pursuing similar acts of benign mischief in their spare time. He was inspired to write the books after developing an interest in model rocketry safety in the late 1950s, and he took care to emphasize safety precautions in his stories. Some of the fictional club's exploits aren't entirely safe. Historical and contemporary fiction taught me to see the world through the eyes of others, giving me a more nuanced and empathetic understanding of the human and non-human condition. Books I returned to repeatedly included well-known animal classics such as Marguerite Henry's King of the Wind, Wilson Rawls' Where the Red Fern Grows, Jean George's My Side of the Mountain, and Jack O'Brien's Silver Chief, Dog of the North. Other favorites that are mostly forgotten today, but shouldn't be, included Nina Bawden's terrific World War II historical drama, Carrie's War, Catherine Sefton's eerie ghost story In a Blue Velvet Dress, and Jean Merrill's The Toothpaste Millionaire, which also fits in the previous category of books about self-reliance, with its story of a boy entrepreneur who decides to sell homemade toothpaste and runs afoul of much larger corporate competitors. It has a strong Andrew Clements vibe. I also love the vicarious thrill of Patricia Edwards Klein's Tunnels of Terror, a gripping story about boys who become trapped by rising water while exploring a network of underground caves. I've always been an optimist by nature, so I didn't gravitate to the horror genre much in my early years. Nevertheless, spooky short story anthologies marketed under Alfred Hitchcock's name struck a chord with me and provided kid-friendly insight into the darker corners of the human psyche. Several of those anthologies were compiled and edited by a frequent Hitchcock collaborator, Robert Arthur, who I mentioned earlier. One of my favorite places to browse in my elementary school's library was the nonfiction section. It had shelf after shelf of informative educational series for kids published from the 1940s to the 1970s. I devoured Random House's Landmark, World Landmark, and All About series, as well as Houghton Mifflin's North Star books, Doubleday's Real Books, Bob Merrill's Childhoods of Famous Americans, Harper and Rowe's American Adventure series, and Grosset and Dunlap's biographical The Story Of series, and its edifying How and Why Wonder books, among others. I had an inquisitive mind, and the hundreds of biographies, histories, science surveys, and how-to guides I found in those bookshelves fueled my curiosity about the world and gave me a leg up when playing Trivial Pursuit in college a decade later. Unlike the newer nonfiction book series I've seen in my own kids' schools, the older series I read as a kid weren't shallow, slapdash books produced by hack writers with little substantive expertise in the subject matter. Instead, they counted among their authors many knowledgeable and accomplished writers, such as Robert Penn Warren, John Dos Passos, Pearl S. Buck, J. Frank Dobie, Shirley Jackson, George R. Stewart, C.S. Forster, Dorothy Canfield Fisher, Harding Carter, Thomas B. Costain, and William L. Shirer. U.S. Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas even penned a couple of volumes about naturalist John Muir and mountaineering, two topics in which he had a strong personal interest. A few more nonfiction books I loved include a series of exquisitely illustrated books by Edwin Tunis that catalog different periods in American history and the development of various technologies from antiquity to the modern day. There's a lot in them to inspire budding engineers, historians, and anthropologists. It's inexcusable to me that most of them are no longer in print. I was also fascinated by Thor Heyerdahl's Kon-Tiki expedition, and this extensively illustrated and only lightly abridged large-format edition taught me about whale sharks, flying fish, the Humboldt Current, and where balsa wood comes from, among many other things. Finally, this classic book by Munro Leaf provided me with a breezy, entertaining overview of world history that stimulated my future interest in the topic. In my opinion, Random House's Landmark and World Landmark series remain the gold standard of middle-grade nonfiction. The landmark books comprised 122 volumes about U.S. history and were published between 1950 and 1970. The World Landmark books presented world history topics in another 63 volumes from that period. Those classic educational series for kids should still be considered relevant today, even if only as templates to be updated to keep pace with progress and the march of knowledge. I haven't yet mentioned the science fiction genre, which I encountered relatively late in my youth. Once I discovered it, though, I found elements that combined and reinforced the lessons and perspectives I'd gained from the books and genres I discussed earlier in this video. One of my favorites was Eleanor Cameron's Mushroom Planet series. More fantasy than science fiction, the books are about two boys who build a homemade rocket ship and fly it to an undiscovered inhabited planetoid in near-Earth orbit. I also discovered A Wrinkle in Time when the author, Madeleine L'Engle, happened to visit my school while on a book tour. I treasure this inscribed copy from L'Engle that my mom received as a thank you for working as a volunteer in the school's library. I also sought out books by prolific SF grandmaster Andre Norton, including The Stars Are Ours, Moon of Three Rings, and Steel Magic, sometimes titled Iron Magic. Steel Magic is an Arthurian portal fantasy, not science fiction, but I'm including it in this group anyway. Nearly all of the books I encountered early in life were written by American authors. That wasn't intentional on my part. Instead, it reflected the emphasis placed on those works by the teachers and librarians who curated my early reading options. From age 10 onward, though, I broadened my reading to enjoy non-American classics by Robert Louis Stevenson, J.M. Barrie, Edith Nesbit, Astrid Lindgren, Kenneth Grahame, Arthur Ransome, C.S. Lewis, and J.R.R. Tolkien, among others. They helped shape my reading taste and cultural knowledge, but my core values, interests, and outlook were already pretty firmly established by then. I hope this look at some of my childhood favorites encourages parents, teachers, librarians, and publishers to keep these books, and others like them, available for kids to read and enjoy. Classic books like these impart valuable life lessons. They contain a broader range of vocabulary words than modern middle grade books typically do, which is an important prerequisite for adult literacy skills, and they help ensure a degree of cross-generational cultural literacy that might otherwise be lost in an uninspiring sea of wimpy kids, dork diaries, underpants heroes, and fart powders. Thanks for watching.